Ready to go.
Okay. All right. I will call to order the Monday, November 8th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. Before we begin, I'd like to call roll. Commissioner Mike Mitchell, I believe, is absent. Okay. Commissioner Staggs.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Stoll.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Gage.
Here.
And Commissioner Schlagenhofer is myself, and I am here. Okay. First item on the agenda, public comments on items not on the agenda, and I believe we have one. Mrs. Dahlrud, please state your name and city of residence. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dorothy Dahlsford. I'm assuming you can hear me. I can't hear a thing in this building. But anyway, first I'd like to start off with my public comment to give great thanks to Autumn and Diliana in planning and code enforcement, because that's why I'm here tonight in code enforcement. I realize that code enforcement is complaint driven, so I try not to pester. When I see garbage dumped on the street, illegal dumping, I call not even 48 hours, it's gone. I reported yesterday a dumping on Molalla at 8:30 in the evening on Sunday because I had the picture in my book. It was gone before I left at 9 o'clock this morning. So hooray. I do the same thing with abandoned cars, and we get a lot of them in our Berkeley Hills neighborhood, and then also campers that have spent more than 78 hours or 72 hours in a neighborhood that look like they're occupied. So these are things that I routinely report on. One of the things that I've reported on, because I do realize that it's against city code, and when we were having businesses come into our neighborhood, we saw some real finger wagging. Now, don't you put up wavy flags, and don't you put up googly wiggly signs, no big banners. I have found that the people they pointed at mostly never did put these things up. However, some of our largest landlords in our city have them all over. We have Cricket with about 5 or 6 different flags. I know that I have reported them no less than 3 times. The only people I'm mentioning are people that I have put up over, or at least 3 reports on, and I try not to do them any sooner than 6 or 8 weeks between each report, so I'm not a pest. I want to be a good citizen, not a pain in the Kiona. So, what I have found is that some of the largest business owners in our city, up at the Hilltop Mall, we've complained about Cricket, complained about Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then sure enough, BOGO Tans and Wings have popped up new flags. I've talked about Southridge Center. They have such bad signs, you can't even read them anymore. They have waved and torn so much. I know that I have given at least 3 notices on them. Sure enough, boom, up comes one from Napa Auto Parts. Let's look at the people who have decided to believe in code enforcement. I reported when Tachos had 3 flags up in their house in front of their business. Within 48 hours, they were all 3 down. I know these things cost about $75 to $100 a piece, some even more. So they took down probably $250 worth of signs to be compliant. Same with a little Texaco up on Beaver Creek. Must be an independent. Within 48 hours, that sign was down. Not so with the Texaco on Molalla and Mountain View. The business on Lynn Avenue, I was very, very patient knowing that COVID's gone through. It must be really hard. You're trying to have a barber shop. the whole corner now is full of flags. It is blatant in our face, it's wrong, and the ones that know the code the most are the biggest offenders. I just want to let you know that these people all have gotten 2 and 3 and 4 letters. There was one spot that even took one down and popped it back up the very next day or within 2 days. I just want to say thank you very much for code enforcement. I think it's time to levy a fine on the owners of these businesses. At least the landowner who is I don't know, but it's their job to tell the businesses in their complex what the rules are. Thank you very much. We don't want to look like 99E running through Gladstone, Milwaukee, with everything waving at us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Okay. Any other comments on items not on the agenda? Okay. All right, first item on the agenda, and we have 2 land use applications tonight. First one is GLUA 21-00029, Sears Farm Planned Unit Development, MAS 21-00003, Master Plan, Planned Unit Development, MAS 21-00004, Detailed Development Plan, Phase 1, MAS 21-00005, Detailed Development Plan, Phase 2, Sub 21-00001, Subdivision 123 lots, GEO 21-0010, Geologic Hazard Review, and NROD 21-00006, Natural Resources Overlay District. Since it is a quasi-judicial hearing, I have a quasi-judicial script. Two public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the Planning Commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants, or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the planning commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any planning commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website and on that door. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we'll open the public record for Oregon City file number GLUA-21-0029 and all the other attached files I previously mentioned. We will now ask each planning commissioner if they have had any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, or if they have visited the site. If there was a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what he or she perceived. I will start on my left, Commissioner Gage.
Contact, no conflict.
Any bias?
No.
No bias, all right. Commissioner West.
I have no ex parte contact, no bias, no conflict of interest. I will declare that Mark Handress had contributed to my 2015 campaign for City Commission and that I have purchased property from him before.
Okay. Commissioner Stoll.
No ex parte contact, no conflicts of interest, no bias. Haven't done a new site visit since the one I disclosed 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Staggs.
I have no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest, and I have not visited the site.
Okay, thank you. As for myself, I have no ex parte contacts, no conflicts of interest. I have no bias on this. I have no other statement to declare, and I have not visited the site since our last meeting. Okay, I'd now like to ask, are there any members of the audience that would like to question any of the commissioners on their disclosures? Okay. All right, we will now commence with the planning staff report, and I believe this is Ms. Kelly Reed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Thanks, Kelly Reed, planner. This is a continuance from October 25th. We held a long hearing, heard public comment, and the record has been open. We've received additional comments in the intervening weeks, and the plan, I want to confirm that you're going to take public comment, additional testimony tonight, with the same hearing procedures that we used last hearing. This is a quasi-judicial review. And Josh Wheeler from our Development Services Department, it has a portion of the staff report, and so I'm going to hand it to him when I'm finished. We also have John Replinger here as well to answer any questions about transportation or traffic. And so as a reminder, this is 35-acre property or group of properties, and the applicant in the Park Place neighborhood on Holcomb Boulevard. It's on the edge of the city limits and the urban growth boundary along the north edge of this site. And we've got a proposal for 123 lots, a planned unit development, to be built in 2 phases, a combination of single-family dwellings along with duplexes on many of the corner lots in the development. Just to review, this is our type 3 review. The applicant has voluntarily submitted a master plan, planned unit development application, as opposed to a type 2 simple subdivision application. And the purpose of the planned unit development code is to allow for greater flexibility along with more discretion in the review for innovative designs. And so that means subdivision designs that include open spaces, a variety of housing types, and the ability to build it in phases. So in your agenda packet, we provided a table that summarized all of the issues that were brought up at the last hearing. And we included a staff explanation and description of what has changed as a response to that particular issue. So I'm not going to go through every single one. The items on this list here have been addressed by that document. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. Regarding stormwater and drainage concerns, there is a revised proposal for handling storm outfalls that the applicant has proposed, and the city and the county have agreed. And I will also add that the city does not control or become involved with private property disputes such as drainage impacts. So if there are impacts to other properties and this happens outside of the development, that is not handled by the city. We did make some clarifications and revisions regarding the number of driveways on corner lots, allowance for 1 flag lot, lighting on pathways, and the number of trees in the open space. And the applicant provided a detailed response to a lot of the issues as well. And the applicant's response addressed not only the things that we already talked about on this list, but also the PGE easement and what is allowed or not allowed in that area. Clackamas County jurisdictional approvals for streets and other utilities that are going off-site, as well as easement issues. And the applicant has, in addition to providing that response, has also sent just today to go along with their response, a record of survey and a plat for the Winston Hills subdivision. And so those are Winston Acres. Those are shown right here. So those have been added to the record to address the question that was brought up about an easement between or on the property shared between this property and the neighboring Winston Acres owners. So for the larger issues on the list, I have a little bit more detail to talk about. We talked a lot about the open space last hearing and whether that should be become a city park, dedicated as a city park or not. We talked to the Parks Department, got additional clarification from them on why they had declined to accept the open space as a public park. They did clarify that the city's parks master plan specifically calls for new parks to be more than 3 acres. So that's the major reason for that decision. The staff report and recommended conditions does not include a requirement for a public access easement over the open space. And condition of approval number 68 has been revised to ensure that the HOA provides ongoing maintenance. So they would be required to record an easement with the city that requires that they maintain that. And that language of that easement would be finalized in coordination with the applicant and with the city attorney. We also talked about sidewalks and street trees and when those should be constructed or be planted when in the construction process. The Planning Commission wished to allow those to go in towards the end of the construction process so that all the heavy equipment that would be on site to build the houses wouldn't destroy brand new sidewalks or street trees. And so we have had discussions with the applicant, and we've provided some revised conditions of approval that I think reflect what the Planning Commission desired. And that is that the sidewalks and street trees would be installed before the houses can be occupied, but not before a building permit is issued. So I think that addresses that concern. And then to make sure that the street trees are planted properly, we have added a condition that at the applicant's expense, a certified arborist selected by the city engineer should review and sign the construction plan drawings. And those drawings would show where the street trees are to be planted, along with all of the utilities that serve those houses. So kind of like that plan there, that's the preliminary utility plan. So we'd have a final one that has actual tree locations that are appropriate. And then we have some additional documentation required, and then a final street tree plan being signed off by an arborist. Construction access. There was a request last hearing to require that a left turn lane on Holcomb that's planned for the development be built, be one of the first things that's built so that the construction vehicles can use that left turn lane to access the site from Holcomb Boulevard. The applicant has indicated that the construction access from Holcomb is problematic for many reasons, and their plan is to initially have construction vehicles access the site from the north, from Forsyth, and come down a public right-of-way that's shown on that diagram there. Once the site would be graded and some of the improvements on Holcomb constructed, once that new local street would be built, then construction vehicles could begin to use Holcomb Boulevard. But until that time, the utilities have to be put underground along Holcomb, and, the street be built. Until that happens, the construction vehicles would use this north access. In addition, we did talk with our transportation consultant, John Replinger, and he indicated that the impacts of the construction traffic don't rise really to the level requiring mitigation. It's temporary, and it's not expected to be disruptive. Curb extensions. Mike Mitchell, who's not here tonight, sent an email that we shared with you and included in the agenda packet, requesting that curb extensions or bulb outs be added where the Barlow Trail crosses the streets. So I've included a couple of images showing what I think Mike is referring to and what that would look like in this context. So there'd be a crossing across the local streets where the Barlow Trail access walkway cuts through the middle of the site. Staff, we support this, and I think it's a great idea. And so we've provided some language for a condition of approval if the Planning Commission would like to add this as a condition. And we did talk with the applicant as well, and there are no concerns about this condition. And so those are all the issues we talked about last hearing. I'm sure you have more questions, but I will let those come up as they will. And I'll just let you know your options tonight. You can approve with the recommended conditions. You can approve with some revised conditions and make revisions, small minor revisions tonight. You can deny with revised findings, or you can continue to date certain. It may be that you need to continue to the next hearing in order to come back and adopt some final findings if there are a lot of changes or additional findings that are needed. Or it may be that you need more information and you need to come back with more information. And if that's the case, then the 120-day deadline would need to be extended. If the record is closed now and we're just coming back with final findings and you're going to take a vote on November 22nd, then we would not need an extension. We can squeeze in any necessary appeal hearings if it comes to that. And with that, I will turn it over to Josh Wheeler.
Thank you, Kelly. So I want to apologize in advance to the Planning Commission. We've been working tirelessly on this application, very complex, a lot of different issues, and haven't even fully had the time to maybe coordinate some of these issues with planning. But what I want to do is go through some conditions that we believe need some adjustment. I read over the staff report this weekend and then worked again with staff to make adjustments and worked with the applicant because some of the way we had initially attempted to address items at the Planning Commission hearing last time had some potential negative effects to the city and the applicant. And so we needed to correct some of the language to make sure that we had it written in a way that was going to be really implementable and usable and beneficial. So what I'm going to try and do is go through some of the conditions of approval. And unfortunately, I don't have a PowerPoint, but so I'm just going to have to describe them to you. Condition 4 talks about what the improvements to Holcomb Boulevard should be. And in an early draft of the staff report, the improvements of Holcomb Boulevard were to follow the Holcomb Boulevard pedestrian concept plan. Some changes were made to try and follow the 1612 guidelines more, but after further review by Engineering Development Services, we have found that for consistency with recent subdivisions, to be consistent with how other projects over the past have been built, as well as honor the public discussions that occurred through an ordinance that adopted that Holcomb pedestrian plan back in 2005. We feel that we should continue to follow that plan. And so that would make Holcomb have 2 travel lanes, a bike lane, and a curb-tight sidewalk 6 feet in width. The transportation impact study shows that a center turn lane is needed for the future transportation impacts. And so therefore the right-of-way dedication should be provided to accommodate any widening needed for that center turn lane. Condition 5 talks about Kalin Drive, and there's a very interesting potential survey issue between the Barlow Crest Phase 1 subdivision and this proposed subdivision. It's not obvious whether or not the pavement of Kalin Drive and the sidewalk of Kalin Drive extends all the way to the applicant's property boundary. There may be a gap. And so we wanted to ensure that gap does not remain. And so there's a condition that revises that. Also, I want to say that some of these conditions were in your packet. Some of them were not because they got adjusted over the last 5 days since the packet went out. Item 7 about the stub streets. And so there's a lot of stub streets on this property. And what we need to make sure of is where they stub in a non-perpendicular way, that we need to make sure that they do that and then pay a fee in lieu for that extension so that it can be built by the proper person when it occurs later. But what we don't do is create dead ends that have a skew to them. Something you saw in the PowerPoint there about sidewalks, we've adjusted that condition to say all sidewalks on-site and off-site shall be constructed with the public improvements prior to platting excepting all lot frontages of building lots. And then sidewalk frontage shall be installed prior to a final certificate of occupancy is issued for the home on that frontage. And so they build all their, it's kind of how we do it now. They build all their sidewalk that's not in front of a house, and then they are allowed to wait to build the part in front of the house until they actually build the house. The way it was worded before did not actually get them there. We've also talked in condition 9 about a photometric plan and the requirements of Holcomb Boulevard. You'll notice on the upward hill of Holcomb Boulevard, there's some decorative pedestrian lighting that occurs along there. That was not included in the last report. We had missed that. It's part of the Holcomb pedestrian concept plan. And so we have added the requirement to have the pedestrian lighting as well as regular street lighting in that area along their frontage. We talked about the vegetated sidewalk really next to the Barlow Crest Trail, and so we concur with that. There may be some elevation issues, and we want to make sure that they don't create diagonal crossings of the sidewalk or of the street. And so we're going to have to look in that a little more detail to make sure that perpendicular crossings occur and not diagonal crossings. Because it's not safe to have a diagonal crossing across the street, even though the Barlow corridor has a diagonal geometry to it. So we tried to amend the condition today to talk about the perpendicular nature, but we're gonna have to work with the applicant during plan review to get that in a direction that's gonna be workable for both of us. And then further on, it is unclear at this point about their stormwater release and how that goes through potentially county property that's not in the city limits. And so we're just saying that during that permitting process, that any permits and approvals will need to be coming from the county if areas outside of the city limits is being used. We also have a question or a statement in comment 27 or condition 27 says additional erosion and sediment control permits shall be obtained from the applicable governing jurisdictions where necessary prior to the start of earth disturbing activities. The reason for that is this question about construction access. And so I may be adjusting what Kelly had presented there, but the city does not dictate where construction access comes from. A property has the right to take access off of whatever road they want. We have nothing in our code that dictates where. We just dictate where it exists, that it has to have a construction access made of the proper type of rock and cleaning methods and things so that dirt and items such like that do not drag out onto the public road. If the developer wants to access the site from a different location rather than Holcomb, we are ensuring that they get the approval from that agency that controls that jurisdiction. So if that's a road that's public, if that's a private road, if it's a county road, they need to get approval from the people that control those roads. So if they were to use the site on the north, that is up to them. And if they choose to, they'll need to get the proper approvals or permits. And that's what that condition is intending to provide. With the street trees, we made some adjustments to what was presented. We are ensuring that the street trees shall be included on the construction plan utility drawings. As you heard, we are requiring that a certified arborist will review and sign the construction plan drawing. But just a certified arborist, we aren't requiring one picked by the city engineer. We never pick consultants or contractors for private development, and we do that for CIP projects. And so as long as they're certified and have a stamp and authorization to their name, that's what's required. And then at the time of planting, they'll need to document with photographs and other documentation the root barrier, planting details. The certified arborist will need to provide a letter or a report certifying that the correct trees were placed in the correct location and in the correct manner, and shall be required prior to the release or reduction of the performance guarantee. So not plat. Plat is what you heard previously. That causes a whole nother issue of trees going in at the wrong time, potentially during the hot season, potentially during another issue that's not good for the growth of the tree. And so the Public Works, who holds the performance guarantee, will ensure that those trees are part of the performance guarantee. And then when the public improvements, the road and the utilities are completed, they can reduce that performance guarantee to the amount that the trees are left. And then they'll be able to do that up to 2 times to reduce it as they plant a group of trees over time. That allows flexibility for if a tree doesn't fit to be able to get the proper tree covenant on a lot, or to do a fee in lieu and the other things that occur when all the trees that are required don't always fit along the right of way. And then there was a few other things that got talked about that I think was in the report that you got for tonight. But we are requiring no parking signage along existing Kalen Drive before construction starts because of the need for fire access. And then we're also ensuring that the path that goes north-south between the school and this development, that's the TSP project that we've talked about, that will be maintained by the city Public Works, and that they will either have to dedicate the path as right-of-way or provide it as an easement with a maintenance and operations agreement on it that shows that we have the right to be there. So we're leaving the option to the applicant. We don't have a concern which way they do that, but we want to make sure that got written in to ensure that they know who was going to do it and that the path was going to be paved. So just wanted to provide those updates. I don't see anything else in here. So if you have any questions about any of those or why we changed something, or we're more than happy to do that. As Kelly said, if you see fit to approve this tonight, we would request that you close the public hearing if you're ready for that at this time, but continue it to the next meeting for the actual approval so that we can give you the updated staff report with the updated findings and conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Josh Wheeler. Before we hear from the applicant, do any of the commissioners have any questions for either Kelly Reed or Mr. Josh Wheeler?
I'm going to ask one.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Mr. Wheeler, why wasn't this, all this information made available to us in our packet tonight? I'm sorry, I missed that. For us to review, you know it all, so why didn't we know it all?
We essentially did not have enough time to get everything done since the last meeting. There were numerous meetings, discussions with the applicant, with other staff, even so much as a meeting that occurred at 1:30 today to talk about conditions that were proposed last week. Were they actually, could we actually implement them? And we had to adjust those because there was just it wasn't fully implementable. And so we had to make adjustments. We've been, like I said, I've been working on this weekend all the way through about 4 o'clock today. So there just wasn't enough time. Apologize that we couldn't get to it sooner. But it's been a moving target for the last 2 weeks.
So all the information you have presented tonight is agreeable with the developer? You've worked it out, the facts that you've, or the findings you've updated tonight?
They should speak to that, but my understanding with the last correspondence I had with them today is that they were, but they should verify if that's true or not.
Yeah, we could ask Mr. Givens. Thank you.
Okay, great question. Anything else? Okay, I am not seeing anything else. So at this time, we're going to hear from the applicant, Mr. Michael Robinson, and you have up to 15 minutes if you wish to. Mr. Givens? Okay. Mr. Givens?
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Rick Givens. I live in Oregon City. I'm a planning consultant for the applicant. We have reviewed, and we really appreciate all the work the staff has done on this application over the last, 2 weeks since our last hearing. There were a lot of things to go through, and we've had a lot of back and forth trying to come up with solutions that worked both for the city and for the applicant. We think we've done that. We are agreeable to the conditions. I think the only one that I think was left outstanding, and I don't know, Josh, whether you've had a chance to comment on this, Darren Gusdorf of Icon responded in an email regarding condition of approval number 36, which has a maximum of 5% of the trees being street trees being able to utilize the fee in lieu of option. In Icon's experience.
Thank you, Rick, to comment on that for you. We did talk about that earlier today. That ultimately comes down to planning, and planning may be asking tonight, the planning commission, would they like to change that number from 5 to something else?
Okay, thank you. The concern we have is that past experience shows that because of locations of all kinds of things, fire hydrants, streetlights, water meters, that it is very difficult to hit the target of one tree every 35 feet, which is the maximum distance set in the code. And in the past, we've been allowed to do up to 15 or 20% of the street trees on a fee in lieu of basis. We're concerned that if that number is held fast at 5%, we're going to be in a situation where we'll have a problem towards the end of this project, which could only be resolved by amending this language. And that would require a whole new application and planning commission process. So we very much would like to get more flexibility in that provision. We understand that we can plant some trees in front yards, but as a practical matter, that can be difficult to arrange before the house is actually constructed and maybe built by somebody else. The additional flexibility of being able to use the fee in lieu of option is a mechanism that just lets us get through the process and get to the where we have a development that'll work. Otherwise, we're very concerned the 5% number will be a roadblock that is going to cause problems for both the city and for the applicant. So we would ask that you give us some more flexibility there. If you need more information on that, I would ask that Darren Gusdorf provide additional testimony in terms of questions. Also here with me tonight, as you heard briefly, is Mike Robinson, the applicant's land use attorney. He is here tonight to answer any questions that relate to process and any legal issues. Also, we have the project's engineering consultants and traffic engineer here. So if you have questions that relate to those topics, we'll draw upon those professionals. I would like to, if I may, share my screen just for a minute. It's currently disabled. Is it possible to get that enabled? Okay. Not yet. Well, I was going to give you just a...
Are you able to share your screen now? I made you co-host.
Okay. No, right now it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, try it now. My apologies.
That should be working. Okay, so you can see my screen here now with the subdivision layout, I hope.
Yes.
And this shows conceptually, obviously the engineering details will be worked out later on, how we would see this working. This is the Barlow Road view corridor passing between the middle block. And as Josh noted, it's on an angle. So this will be a pedestrian pathway that would come up to the sidewalk here, and the crossing would be perpendicular. It doesn't affect the view corridor, which continues on across here, which would be protected by the park anyway. On the other side of the situation of the development, we're showing the same traffic calming device, if you will, but this is not a pedestrian pathway on this side. It's simply a view corridor. So we really don't have the same issue, but it would allow people to cross the block and then connect into the mid-block pathway. So that's all I had on that. I'll stop sharing here. Let me see. We introduced into the record tonight a copy of the plat of the Winston Acres subdivision, which was recorded way back in the early 1900s, I believe. And that's what created all of the 5-acre parcels that are currently on this property and continue beyond there. I only mention that it's necessary to show that that's what created the public roadway that I forget the gentleman's name, Sprague, I believe it was concerned about. That was vacated, his strip, back in the 1950s. It shows that on the plat. And it's clear that it was done well before the Winston Hills subdivision, where he resides, was platted in the 70s. So there are no easement provisions. It followed the typical state law process where the road was divided. Half of it went to each adjoining property owner on either side. It's also important to note, relative to some written testimony that was provided by Mr. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name, Ed Koloyak and Karen Streeter. They were concerned about the construction access to the property and stated in that it was just a private dirt road. That's not the case. The plat clearly shows that that roadway was dedicated for public use. And it continues to be public in that strip, even though it's unimproved. That would be brought up to city standard, to construction standard of a gravel roadway. We're also proposing to put a piped storm sewer system through that. Just to be clear, we would remain 50 feet off of the out of the buffer zone for the wetland that exists off-site. And we would do that via an easement on the Sears property, which is to the west. That, I think, concludes everything I have in my notes to bring up to discuss with you. But I will, before I sign off, ask Mike if he has something he would like to say at this point.
He does not.
Does not. Okay. Well, then I will just make myself available for questions, or I can direct your questions to people who may be able to answer it better than I can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Givens. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner West?
I'm looking through my notes here. You were, or somewhere in the application or the information presented to us, you were saying that exterior lots would not have the same setbacks from the 8 feet to the 7 feet. So are those like lots 40 to 52 and 92 to 99? Or did I misunderstand that? Is everything going to have the 7-foot interior setback, or are those outer ones going to be a little wider?
The proposal is to allow all of the lots that are not on the perimeter of the project to use the same interior line setbacks as you have for the R8 zone, which is 7 feet. For those lots on the perimeter of the project, we're proposing the standard 8 feet. It only makes a difference of 1 foot. So it's not a huge difference, but because we've reduced the lot sizes down to 8,000 square feet, it does give us the same, roughly 8,000 square feet. It does give us more flexibility. The area that we really intended it to apply was primarily on the lots that abut the Winston Hills subdivision. Maybe I can share my screen here again. So these lots all along here, we wanted to make sure that we weren't asking for any reduction. Most of the lots in that area are around 10,000 square feet. We tried to provide, a standard lots as much as possible on the perimeter of the project. And we would maintain the 8-foot side yard setbacks. There's no difference in the rear yard setback. It's 20 feet in both zones. I don't think it makes as much sense, frankly, on the perimeter that's outside the urban growth boundary, but we will abide by that and keep the standard R10 setback. The lots over here do not abut. They aren't on the perimeter, they're interior, so it wouldn't apply there. It would apply to these lots along here, lots 61 through 66, 70, and continuing on around. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right, I had a few things, I had a few issues, mostly on the issues matrix, but staff's done a really good job of clarifying every one of those items that I really don't have much else to say. So if nobody else has anything for the applicant, we will go on to public comments. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Mr. Robinson, you had nothing. Okay. Okay, so now we'll go to public comments from neighborhood associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations. And I see that we have Mr. Bob LaSalle from the neighborhood association. And you have 5 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence. Thank you.
I have some handouts to give to each of you commissioners. Well, I spent quite a bit of time over the last few years educating myself on city codes.
Can you state your name and city of residence for the record?
I'm Bob LaSalle. I live in the city of Oregon City, and I represent the Park Place Neighborhood Association. And for the last several years, I've devoted a lot of time educating myself on the zone and all the codes that are applicable. And I've learned something new at the last meeting, was that the master plans or planned unit developments actually trump city code. And I didn't know anything trumped city code, but they obviously do. I quoted the code on the reduction of lots and that has been ignored. Since 1997, there have been or soon will be 1,206 homes built in Park Place, and I've attached a report for you from the city GIS. That represents approximately 12,000 daily trip increases, while absolutely nothing has been done to improve Holcomb Boulevard, nothing whatsoever. Got some sidewalks, that's it. We ask, when are you going to put an end to this? All these developments being developed with all the traffic going to Holcomb Boulevard. Now, at least 2 city commissioners have expressed concern that there's no alternate route out of Park Place. Developers' traffic studies have indicated the need for alternate routes. The Park Place concept plan says the same thing. So you're getting all kinds of information about alternate routes being needed, nothing's being done. During the recent wildfire events, it took people over 2 hours to get out of the Park Place area, and some of them just gave up, went back home, despite the danger, because Holcomb Boulevard was the only route available. But there are solutions. In the Transportation System Plan of 2013, there are the Hawley Lane and Swan Avenue extensions, both of which would connect Holcomb Boulevard to Redland Road, and I've attached a map that shows that for you there. There's also Livesay Road, a county road, which would have to be improved as indicated in the letter from the Clackamas Department of Transportation and Development dated May 5th, 2021, and I've attached that letter for your information. Now, these cumulative trips over the years are contributing to the safety of the residents in addition to affecting their quality of life. I know because I live there. Now, you've got the ability to stop further development until alternate routes in and out of Holcomb Boulevard area are built. You've got the ability to do that. All you need is the courage to do it. Many times, morning traffic on Redland Road is backed up from Highway 213 all the way back to Holcomb Boulevard. The evening traffic on Redland Road can be backed up all the way from Highway 213 all the way down to Holcomb Boulevard. This isn't even taking into consideration the construction traffic that often slows the uphill traffic on Holcomb Boulevard to a virtual crawl. And this will continue as you allow developments to continue until their alternate routes are available. Now also consider the premature wear and tear on Holcomb Boulevard from all the heavy construction vehicles, which all the taxpayers, you and I, in Oregon City will be paying for. So we urge you to have the courage and the common sense to halt further development until alternate routes can be completed in and out of Park Place. And I'd like to request a continuance to allow the commission to absorb all the new information that you just received from Josh Wheeler, if nothing else. That's all I have. I'd be happy to answer your questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. LaSalle. Did anyone? Okay, I do appreciate your comments. Thank you. Okay, going into public comments now from the general public. The first one I've got here, I hope I got them in the right order. Mr. Edward Kalawiak. Thank you. Please state your name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Edward Kulaviak. My wife Linda and I live at 14720 Forsyth Road in Oregon City. We live on the corner of Forsyth and Gerkman Road. My comments tonight are based on the applicant's November 1st memo in the hearing packet for tonight's continued hearing, specifically the part about construction access being moved from Holcomb Boulevard to Forsyth and Gerkman Roads. By proposing an entirely new construction access off of Forsyth Road and Gerkman Road, the applicant is expanding the project footprint in a significant way. This proposal extends the project beyond the City of Oregon City boundary and beyond the urban growth boundary into rural Clackamas County. Not only would changing the project footprint at this point require reevaluation of all aspects of this proposal, environmental, engineering, traffic, stormwater, and so on, it also introduces a complicated land use approval process, introducing Metro and Clackamas County into the review process. While it seems that a construction access is something relatively innocent in the big scheme of things, it would require widening of what is now a single-lane dirt road, only big enough for a tractor, into some sort of roadway, a quarter-mile plus, that would allow two-way construction equipment such as excavators, dump trucks, cement trucks, asphalt trucks, truss and lumber trucks in and out, not to mention individual contractor employees reporting to work each day. A construction access requires equivalent environmental and traffic impact analysis, as does final construction of the layout. The construction access is now being referred to as public land. It has always been considered to be a private road used for farming purposes only, with PGE having a right-of-way for maintenance. The public has been kept off this road, even to the extent of blocking the entrance with farm equipment and trailers. When I asked the surveyors from Centerline Concept, they told me it was a private road. The residents who live on Gerkman Road use this to access their homes. They are highly concerned about this information. They have received no public notice from the city about this proposal that would directly affect their ingress and egress for some time, nor have they had a chance to consider or comment. Of significance is an existing school bus stop at the corner of Forsyth and Gerkman Road. One can easily imagine the issues arising with elementary school kids waiting for the bus while massive construction equipment rolls by them. As a parent, I would be extremely concerned about letting any of my own kids stand in such a place to wait for the bus. I would like to hear the school district's comment on this proposal as well. As for access off of Forsyth Road, it would be difficult at best. Forsyth Road is narrow with many sharp curves and drop-offs. As for Gerkman Road, it is a gravel road on a sharp curve. Then there is the impact of traffic management trying to get to the access road, the impact on surrounding city streets such as Swan and Hunter coming over from Holcomb Boulevard. In summary, several other developments have managed to figure out how to use Holcomb Boulevard and roads like it for construction access during their development phase. I believe that this developer should be held to the same standard and required to figure it out and use a road within the City of Oregon City to access their major development. This development proposal was always to have access off of Holcomb Boulevard. It is an Oregon City project, so let's keep it in Oregon City and don't extend it into rural Clackamas County. Thank you for the opportunity to address this committee and express my concerns.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Mrs. Dorothy Dalsrud. I'm sorry. That is number 2. I think that is, nope. There's the last one. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Okay. Come on up, fill out a comment card afterwards. You can come up now. Just state your name and city of residence.
My name is Mary Herbst, and I'm an Oregon City resident. And we also own property. I agree with Ed, what he was just saying. We live on Girkman Road, and Girkman Road is actually a county road, but it's self-maintained. And so with construction trucks coming onto our road that we have to maintain in order to go up the dirt road, and it is just a dirt road. And we actually, according to our deed, we have access to that road as well with our property. And so we don't want it destroyed or, you know, too busy, all these construction trucks going up and down without there being some sort of access for us as well. So I had not heard anything about it coming off of Forsyth until tonight. So I hadn't planned on speaking, but I wanted to make sure that concern was addressed. And I think it goes back to what Bob is saying. Nothing has been addressed with Holcomb Road. And that's why now all of a sudden everything wants to go to Forsyth Road because Holcomb Road hasn't been addressed. And Forsyth Road is not any better for those trucks to go on than Holcomb. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay. Any other comments? Any online comments? I don't see any. Okay. All right. I do have a couple of questions about some of the comments we've had. I know our purview is City of Oregon City, but in a case like this where, you know, construction traffic does go onto county roads, and Josh Wheeler touched on it a bit that they would have to get a county permit, but how do we know that they get the county permit? Is that something we're involved in at all?
No.
Want Josh to answer?
I assume you want me to answer that, Commissioner?
Okay.
We will not sign off on our engineering plans and give them a permit to build without seeing approval from the county.
Okay, and then any of the traffic counts, I know the Oregon City is involved in our roads. Are the county roads considered in these applications? Is that part of the traffic studies?
I think Mr. Replinger can probably best answer that question.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm John Replinger, transportation consultant to the City of Oregon City. Office and residence are City of Portland. The short answer is that the county roads would be considered if they meet the standards of utilization, that is the traffic volumes that are specified in our guidelines for traffic impact analyses. And so in this particular case, traffic is not expected to use county roads, but not expected to use Forsyth Road. The proposal for construction access is something that was not addressed in the transportation impact study, and it likely would not have been because the traffic volumes associated with construction are below the specified level that we have in our guidelines. Did I make that too complicated to okay, thank you.
Okay, and then what about wear and tear on the roads? Is that becomes a private civil issue?
That's out of my purview in terms of the transportation analyses.
All right, and then what about the concerns about emergency type situations where there's a lot of people trying to leave the area at one point, and we've had one incident in the last year where there was hours-long backup, and if the fire would have proceeded as feared, people could have possibly been stuck. Is that something we ever need to consider? And maybe should we?
We have not taken any steps to address that in terms of any of our transportation analyses. The city has participated, for example, with Clackamas County in developing the emergency access routes that related to Highway 99E and use of South End Road and some others. So there are some steps that have been taken by the city and the county jointly to address that issue on 99, but there has been, to my knowledge, no action relating to such things as Redland Road or Holcomb Boulevard, at least to this point.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have something for Mr. Ripplinger?
I do.
Okay, Mrs. Gage.
One of the questions that I have is, was there to be proper notification given to the property owners around there that their road that they use, their kind of privately, was going to be used for this purpose?
Notification is something that's not my responsibility. I would leave that to the planning staff to address issues on notification.
Okay.
I'm checking the public notice. So we send out the land use notice to everyone within 300 feet. I'm just double checking that boundary. It only includes properties in the city limits. So outside of the UGB, those don't get picked up by our noticing mechanism that tells us who's within 300 feet. There are public notices, posted on the website and then on the property as well. And so we give the applicant land use notice signs to post on the property on every street frontage. So in this case, that included along Holcomb, at the Kalen Drive street stub, and then all on the north side where this dirt road that we're talking about, facing that dirt road. So those signs were posted in those locations. So that is our noticing mechanism.
Thank you.
Any questions specifically addressed to Mr. Ripplinger? Okay, thank you very much. And any questions for staff?
Yeah, I've got one. I just want to clarify. So for a development like this where the property abuts the city limits, the abutting property owner outside of the city limits doesn't get noticed?
So this one's on the urban growth boundary, and so I'm not sure if it were in the urban growth boundary. I think we'd have to check with our GIS department on how that's set up. But for this one, it's cutting off at the city limits, which is also the urban growth boundary line.
Right. But does the code, if the code says within 300 feet, or does it say city within the city limits within 300 feet? This sounds like maybe it's a technical problem with GIS that's led to adjacent property owners not being properly noticed.
Yeah, well, and I'll add too that, the land use notice, this was noticed in August or September, when the application was deemed complete and we scheduled the first hearing date. At the time, there was nothing in the application about construction access. We never require that. So even if, anyone who did access that notice and look at the application wouldn't have found any information on construction access, that only has come up in the last month. And so, that's kind of how this hearing process goes.
Thank you.
I just have one more question on these roads. So all the roads, if they divert the construction traffic back over to Forsyth, these are not private drives. These are either a city road, a public easement, which is a public road, or a public county road. Is that right?
Yes, they're all county roads. Forsyth, and then the unnamed road is a county public road.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Chair Schlagenhofer. So we do have an issue with noticing on this application then. It does look like we did not notice those outside the UGB, and we are required to.
Okay.
So we'll have to renotice.
And what does that do to our timeline?
Let's come back around to that question if we can, when we reach the end of our meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for staff before we give the applicant a chance to rebut? Okay. All right, if the applicant would like to address any of these concerns brought up, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
the record, Rick Givens, Oregon City. I'll take just a couple of minutes here and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Robinson to finish up. Regarding the construction access issue, we're simply trying to provide for the window of time where we need to get equipment on site to do grading and get the initial coring into the roads, get the frontage improvements, the wires taken down so we have an access that works. There's a picture in your packet from in our letter that shows on the frontage of Holcomb Boulevard, the wires hang down to within probably 8 feet of the ground surface, I would guess, from having walked along their posting signs. They're not very high. So that needs to get cleared up, and we need to get a ditch covered, and there's, widen the road and various things. And we're going to need to get equipment on site in order to do that. Once that's done and we have the access available from Holcomb Boulevard, we will bring our, all the construction for the homes and those kind of things will be done, come from that direction. We have had a conversation here just tonight with Mr. Sears, who's indicated that he would probably allow us to bring the construction traffic directly in from Forsyth and avoid Yerkman and the public road. We'd be happy to explore that option. We may be able to do something on bringing it in from Holcomb as well, but that looks to be more problematic, at least until we get into that, a little bit of construction done on site. I cannot comment on the issue of notice. I think that's for Mr. Robinson and the city's attorney to talk about. Let's see. Bob LaSalle's comment about the ordinance for the master plan trumping the city code is kind of a skewed way of stating it. Chapter 1608 establishes the normal process for doing a standard type 2 subdivision in the city of Oregon City. And it states that if you're going to do something more involved than that, you use the master plan process, which has allowed additional flexibility because it provides for the process we're using tonight, where there's a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission. The intent is to provide an opportunity for more flexibility. That's part of the city code as well. So the process allows the Planning Commission to make reasonable adjustments to the standards of the zoning ordinance and the provisions of 1608 land development regulations to allow for that flexibility. It's not a trumping, it's simply an expansion because you're using a public hearing process. The city wants there to be a greater flexibility built into the master plan process. That's why it does it that way. It gives you the ability to look at things that you wouldn't be able to do through a standard subdivision process. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Robinson. I talked too long.
Thanks, Rick.
Mm-hmm.
May I just call you Dirk? Sure. I'm not sure I can pronounce your last name. I'm just kidding. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. My last name is spelled R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97204. May I make one suggestion? I should be able to do my rebuttal easily within a minute and 15 seconds. But you might, it's purely your call. You may want to keep the public hearing open in case you or staff have questions about how you handle the notice and whether we will extend the clock. And you'd want to be able to ask us those questions, but that's up to you. So 2 comments. First of all, on Mr. LaSalle's testimony about traffic. I think you have ample evidence in the record before you that whatever standards exist for traffic, we meet those. If you look at staff report pages 36, 53, and 54, 36 has to do with satisfaction of the city's TSP. About halfway down the page, the staff report states, quote, finding complies with the condition. If you go to pages 53 and 54, that's Mr. Replinger's testimony with respect to the applicant's traffic evidence. On page 53, he says that he reviewed the applicant's traffic study and found that it was adequate. On page 54, he said he concurs with the applicant's engineer that the intersections will continue to meet the city's mobility standards. As you said at the outset of the hearing, your standard is, do we meet the approval criteria? This is substantial evidence demonstrating that that's the case. The only other issue I'll raise for you tonight is whether the construction access can be as proposed. It can be. There's no state law prohibiting construction access outside the UGB because that's not development or urban properties. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so we need to make a decision if, I feel like we have a lot of loose ends to tie up. I don't think we can make a decision tonight. I need a little clarification from Laura. What exactly do we need as far as notifying anyone to the north on private property that's not inside the city limits? Do we have any kind of legal obligation to do that? Okay. How far? Is it 300 feet? Is it everybody? Okay, even though they're not within the city.
100 feet. The boundary doesn't have anything. Code doesn't just boundary, urban growth boundary, as far as I can tell. So the notice should have been provided to 100 feet of the property, county. We checked, and there are individuals there who have not testified as part of this process, so we need to give them notice. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to continue this hearing, leaving the record open. And we're going to have to call a special meeting right after Thanksgiving in order to resume and provide an opportunity for these folks to come in. And what this is going to do is it's going to result in, we've got a 120-day deadline in January. And so we're sort of backing up our meetings here in order to accommodate that deadline. And so unless the applicant is willing to extend the 120-day clock another month, we're going to be calling a special meeting, I think, on November 29th. We're going to be issuing a presumptive notice of appeal, even though maybe an appeal hasn't been filed yet. We're going to issue notice of that, and we may have to call a special meeting in the City Commission in December. If you want to ask the applicant whether or not they're willing to extend the 120-day clock, we can do that.
Okay. You heard the concerns. Let's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Mike Robinson here on behalf of the applicant. May I ask Ms. Richter a couple of questions? Because I apologize, I wasn't sure I heard anything. Curious.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to clear this up.
Thank you. Is the city going to mail new notice?
Yes.
Okay. And if you may I ask when you think you'll be able to get that out?
Tomorrow.
And so if you mail new notice on the 9th, that would give us a hearing sometime on the 29th or later?
29th or later.
Do you have a hearing date yet?
We 29th, or, I mean, it'll be the 29th, or we'd rather have it the first week of, the regular planning commission date, which is the December 13th.
And you'll have
just 2 weeks later, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
And then we're going to have to have a final decision that day, and then we'll have to have an appeal period for a hearing
Well, you'll have to mail, you can have a tentative decision that day, and then you have to mail notice of the decision, which triggers the appeal period, correct?
Correct.
May I ask when you thought you might, assuming the planning commission makes a tentative decision on the 13th, do you know when you might get the decision out, Laura?
The 14th of December. Then there is a 14-day appeal period. What we could do is shorten that period by issuing notice that if they're on the 15th, let's say, of December, we issue a presumptive notice. There may be an appeal. If an appeal is filed, the city commission will proceed on this application on January 5th.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I do.
I'll shorten it.
Yeah.
Right, but we'd need more than, we need to go beyond the 5th.
Yeah, gotcha. So the notice will go out tomorrow with the hearing date of the 13th. That's what you're anticipating?
That would be our preference.
Okay. Hang on just a moment. Mr. Chair, let me just excuse myself for a moment and walk back and chat with my client, and then if I may, I'll come back up and extend the clock. But I just want
how much time do you need?
Could we take a 5-minute recess? Would that be
perfect? Okay. Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.
We are back from break. Okay, we will now hear from, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's Mike Robinson.
Mike Robinson,
Okay.
what did you come up with?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Mike Robinson again on behalf of applicant. I thought what I would do very quickly is just describe the schedule that I discussed with Ms. Richter, Ms. Turway, and make sure they're comfortable with that. And then at the end of that, I'll grant an extension of the 120-day clock in ORS 227-178 sub 1 on behalf of the applicant. So my understanding is the city's going to give new notice tomorrow. Notice is required 20 days prior to the scheduled hearing. My understanding is the Planning Commission, the notice will be for a December 13th Planning Commission hearing. That won't be the initial evidentiary hearing. That occurred in October, but that will comply with state law notice requirements. It will be to 300 feet from the property boundary, which satisfies the Oregon City Municipal Code. And then my understanding is the city, if the Planning Commission makes a tentative decision on the 13th of December, and by the way, at that hearing, there's no mandatory obligation to continue the hearing or leave the written record open. It's discretionary, but it's not required as it was for the first hearing. So if you make a tentative decision that night, my understanding is staff will give notice on the 15th. That starts the 14-day appeal period, and that appeal period ends on the 29th of December. So based on that schedule, we'll extend the clock from tonight through December 29th for a total of 51 days. Well, that gets added to wherever the 120-day clock presently ends. And I have the applicant's authority to extend the clock.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Did I get that right? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, are we clear on our continuance?
It would be to December 13th.
Okay. All right, so we need to continue this to December 13th. Do we have a motion? And is it a continuance? It is not. It's because now it's not with revised conditions and findings. What exactly are we going to continue it? What are we going to call it?
Matter. Record remains open for written testimony until December 13th,
Okay.
which time we will reconvene and allow folks to testify. And then if the commission so chooses, make a final decision.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to continue GLUA 21-00029 to December 13th, and leaving the record open.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Stoll. Do we have
I'll
a
second it.
Okay, and a second by Commissioner West. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Gage,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Since I read the script for the quasi-judicial hearing, has anybody new?
I don't believe so, and I was trying to make sure I remembered where everyone sat. So I think we can safely proceed with the second matter for tonight. You will need to poll the commissioners for ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias.
Okay. All right. Just a second. Okay, second item on the agenda, GLUA-21-00044 with SP 21-00085, VAR 21-00004, FP 21-00004, corner 14 variance to rear yard setback. I do not need to reread the quasi-judicial script, but I do need to ask if any of our commissioners have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or anything else they'd like to declare. I'll start with Commissioner Staggs.
I have none of those.
And a site visit?
I've seen the property several times.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gage.
No bias, no ex parte conflicts of interest. I have been by the site many times, off the site many.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner West.
I have no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest, bias. I have eaten at corner 14. I know Mr. Fowler. I did drive by today to take a look at that, the angle of it, alley there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stoll?
No bias, no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest. I did go down there this evening, ordered some food and walked around the property while my food is being prepared.
Thank you. As for myself, I had no ex parte contacts. I have no conflicts of interest. I have no bias. I did go there today. What I observed was it's a very tall hill and it's got some vegetation on it, and it seems like the houses or the residences are way up there. So I don't know if they're going to have a issue with it. It seemed pretty reasonable to me. So that's what I saw. And does anyone in the audience care to question any of the commissioners on their statements? All right. Okay. We will now open the record.
Mr. Chair, I want to add something, this observation that I made. When I was there, there are, in the area where this cover is supposed to be built, there's already sober parking spots. There's already tables in that area. That addresses one of the comments that we received. So I did note that it's already, those parking spots are already out of commission.
Okay, thank you.
Dirk, I have a quick comment.
Yes, Commissioner.
When people are on the Zoom call, we cannot hear anything that's being said unless people's microphones are turned on. So could you just remind everyone to turn on their microphone when they talk?
Oh, okay. Absolutely. Who in particular did you not hear?
A couple of the commissioners that just right now, when they were talking, they didn't have the microphones on, so I couldn't tell what they were saying.
Well, so the light was on. Was I not close enough?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I visited this evening, in the area where the structure is going to be built, one of the public comments noted that the parking spaces were going to be deleted to add this extra seating. That extra seating has already been added. There's picnic tables in that space.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And with that, and would anyone in the audience care to question any of the commissioners on the clarified statement? Okay. All right. So with that, we will open the public record for GLUA 21-00044 with the corresponding extra items that I've previously read. And I believe we're going to hear from staff, and it is Mrs. Diliana Vasilieva.
Thank you. I'm Diliana Vasilieva. I'm the assistant planner for the city, and I will be presenting the staff report for the Corner 14 expansion. This application includes a site plan and design review, variance, and floodplain review. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'll focus on the variance aspect, since that is the reason that this is before you tonight. So the property is located at the corner of 14th Street and Washington. It is zoned mixed use downtown, MUD. It's approximately 29,000 square feet in size. And it is within the floodplain overlay, which is shown in blue on the right-hand side, as well as partially within the geologic hazards overlay, which is shown in yellow. The property is developed with the corner 14 food cart pod, which includes a tap house, 12 existing food carts, outdoor seating areas, as well as a parking lot with 30 stalls. With this application, the applicant is proposing to make some alterations to the southeast corner of the site, which is shown in red. They are proposing to add 2 new food carts, new outdoor seating areas, including an 800 square foot canopy structure. They are also proposing to remove 8 existing parking stalls, which would result in a total of 22 parking stalls remaining on site, which would actually bring the site into compliance with minimum and maximum parking standards. Right now, they are currently overparked based on the size of the tap house and the existing and proposed covered seating area. Under our code, a minimum of 18 parking stalls would be required, and a maximum of 22 parking stalls would be allowed prior to taking any additional reductions that are allowed under our code. So with the proposed 22 parking stalls, they would be coming into compliance with the parking requirements. So again, the reason that this is before you is due to the proposed 800 square foot canopy structure, which is shown in yellow there. It is located 1 to 2 feet from the rear property line, depending on where you're measuring from. Although typically within the mixed-use downtown zone, we do not require any minimum rear or side yard setbacks. Our code does require a 15-foot minimum setback if the property abuts a residential zone, which in this case it does to the south. So for that reason, a variance to the minimum setback is required. Quick reminder of the variance criteria. Our code requires that the variance is not likely to cause substantial damage to adjacent properties, that the minimum variance would alleviate the hardship, that granting the variance will equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation, that any impacts resulting from the variance are mitigated, and that there are no practical alternatives that have been identified which would accomplish the same purpose without a need for a variance, and that the variance conforms to the comprehensive plan. So the intent and purpose of setback requirements is to provide privacy and separation between neighboring structures and uses, to provide fire separation and access to light and air. And in this situation, a larger setback is required when abutting a residential property to prevent commercial development, which is generally larger in scale and size, from imposing on smaller scale residential developments. So in this case, although the applicant is proposing to be as close as 1 foot to the southern property line abutting that residential zone, the existing houses on 13th Street are approximately 30 feet above the corner 14 property. And the houses themselves are located more than 80 feet away distance-wise, so there's an adequate separation even though the proposed canopy cover is only 1 foot from that property line. It's also unlikely that the backyards of those residential properties will be further developed due to existing steep slopes and restrictions in the geologic hazards overlay. The picture shows the 25% slopes in orange, and it's hard to tell, but there are also 35% slopes shown in red. And finally, the hillside between the subject site and the houses on 13th is heavily vegetated, providing additional screening and privacy and acting as a buffer. The picture on the left is the approximate location where the proposed canopy structure will be located to give you an idea of the vegetation. And then on the right-hand side, would be just to the side of the structure, but you can kind of see the one of the residential structures, its roof peeking over to give you an idea of the location of the houses compared to the subject site. So typically with a variance, there is some kind of hardship that is preventing you from meeting the code. In this case, it is the required loading area, which is shown in orange there. We require a loading area for all food cart pods with more than 10 food carts. But on top of that, because this site is in the floodplain, with the prior applications as well as this one, we have a condition of approval that the food carts need to be removed off-site and out of the floodplain in the event of a flood. If the applicant were to comply with the setback requirements, it would hinder the evacuation of the food carts during a flood event, creating a safety hazard. And we do have a condition of approval to provide the maximum setback possible from that property line while still maintaining the required loading area. So we have a condition of approval for a revised site plan showing the dimensions that are required for that loading area and making sure that the canopy is located as far away from the property line while still not encroaching into the required loading area. So because of the significant elevation change, the distance between the canopy and the houses on 13th Street, the unlikelihood of any further development on those properties on 13th Street due to the steep slopes and the existing vegetation on those properties, staff is not recommending any additional mitigation. Of course, the Planning Commission can impose additional mitigation requirements if you feel that there are impacts of this variance that need to be mitigated. So we find that the applicable variance criteria has been met. We did receive one additional comment from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association earlier today, which was emailed to the Planning Commission and passed out earlier. And with that, I can answer any questions, and we are recommending approval of this application with conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to the applicant, do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner West.
So you had in that yellow area where the loading area is, so is there tables and chairs to be allowed in there? Or is that just supposed to be empty all the time for loading?
It is not required to be empty all the time. They can have furniture in there that can easily be moved in the event of a flood event.
Okay, so it's just things that can be moved. They're not fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got one question, and it's probably nothing, but that stairway that we see in the pictures, is that a private stairway? Is that public?
It is on private property. I'm not sure if there are easements for, other properties on 13th Street to be able to utilize it, but it is located on private property.
Okay, and then none of the changes are gonna inhibit the ability to use the stairway for the property owner?
No, the proposed canopy structure is offset from the stairway, so that access to that stairway will remain open.
Okay, I'm making sure we're not putting a table in front of a stairway. Okay, all right, that was about it. Any other questions? Okay, all right, so we will, we'll give 15 minutes to the applicant if the applicant chooses to spend that much time.
I believe we have Derek Medson on Zoom.
On Zoom, okay, go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm glad so many of you have visited the site. It's obviously a very nice place to be, and I hope you enjoyed your time there. So we are...
Oh, I'm sorry, please state your name and city residence.
Derek Medson, Green Box Architecture, 502 7th Street in Oregon City. So if I may...
Is there any way to turn him up?
I turned him up as much as I can.
Okay. All right, Derek, do your best. We're having some people that are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Okay.
I apologize. Is this better?
We appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Okay. So I feel that staff did a very good job of explaining the project in totality. If I may share my screen, I will just touch base on a couple things here related to the project. Okay, so this is the site, as you've seen. Down here, this space in orange is where we're looking to provide that canopy. As Diliana mentioned, we are going to place that within a foot or two of that property line, and that is entirely because we want the ability to evacuate these food carts in the case of a flood such as 1996. The furniture that's placed in this area here is wood furniture, benches, picnic tables, much like you've seen on the rest of the site. So those can easily be evacuated so that food carts can be shuttled out in case of emergency. One additional diagram that I'll show is here's a site plan of the space looking at the canopy that we're looking at just a moment ago. And then again, 517 over here. We've got the grades, which we put into a section. And you can see that the house is located roughly 20 feet above the canopy here. And the zoning code generally assumes that all properties are flat. But as we know in Oregon City, many properties are not flat. And this is one of those circumstances where the majority of the land in between the property line and the house itself is a geological hazard. The developable area of that residential property is extremely limited. I sat through the review process of Island Architects when they were proposing building this duplex here. And this area in between these, this canopy and that house is set apart and may not be developed because of the geological hazard. This gray line that we have running along here, that illustrates the height of Washington Street directly east of the property. And so this canopy is set well back from Washington Street. And in addition to that, it's set below the grade of the street. So largely not visible at all. So the views from the adjacent residents are unobstructed. We've illustrated the extent of landscaping that is existing. And in addition to that, the neighbor here at 517 has provided a letter of support advocating for this project and that they appreciate Corner 14 as a neighbor. I know that the business owners have done everything they can to reach out to the community, solicit feedback, and identify those folks who would be most directly impacted. And they've received many kind words and notices of affirmation and support. So we have no objection to staff recommendations. We do request the removal of condition number 4, which would identify a loading area. As staff mentioned, we have this seating area, which would be loading for the food carts. I believe what she is referring to, Diliana, that is, in loading and unloading would be for beer trucks or food deliveries, which we've placed notes over the allotted location for that, but that anticipated loading and unloading for deliveries is over in this area. As you can see, we have an in and out along 14th Street. We have an out only along the Center Street alley over here. And this area right here is actually what's designated for loading and unloading of deliveries. So I would ask that condition 4 be removed, but we take no exceptions to the other 10. So that concludes my statements.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Stoll.
The letter from 517, is that provided in your application packet? I haven't received any public comment from them.
I believe, I don't know that that was provided. I thought it was, but I could be mistaken. I know that the business owner, Charisse, approached him and spoke with him directly, and he even offered an easement if that would allow this to happen, but that wasn't necessary, simply him not objecting to the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, I don't believe we have anybody from a neighborhood association here.
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right, well, then we have a couple individuals. First is Dorothy Dalsrud. You have 3 minutes. Oh, please state your name and city of residence.
My name is Dorothy Dalsrud. I live in Oregon City. I assume you hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm basically back up here, very similar to the first complaint I had about.
We can't hear
signage.
her online.
Is your light on?
Mike.
On your mic?
I see a green light.
Okay, try getting really close to it.
My name is Dorothy Dalsrud. I live in Oregon City.
Still not working.
Should I go over to the other one?
Yeah, maybe try the other one. You get a good echo and it's working.
Testing. Okay. I think I'll step back a little bit from this one. My name is Dorothy Dalsrud. I live in Oregon City. I'm here. One thing you heard me earlier speak about signage and wavy flags and people that are not staying up into code. When I was at the CIC meeting, I heard the architect speak about this and I thought, oh, great, I'll address the maybe owner or the manager of that property because I know I have sent at least 3 complaints over a period of a year on the signage on the carts. Not only do they have wavy flags, but they have signage on top of the carts, in front of the carts that are all against city signage code. Looks a little bit like Portlandia or Cartlandia on 82nd. I was there today and I went, yeah, looking a little bit tacky. Also, and it's blatant. It's blatant. One of those wavy flags came down for 2 days and it got stuck right back up because the other one didn't come down. I happen to go by that twice a day because it's on my way to the dog park, just as reference. The other top of the hill, I go by there 4 times a week because my gym is up there. So I pass these on a daily basis in my regular route. When I was at the CIC meeting and we had the architect speaking to us, which I refrained from speaking about the signage at that time because it had nothing to do with the architect. It has to do with the owner. He said they were reducing the parking, that they were being required by our city to reduce their parking. I thought he said 22 to 20, and they're reducing it by 8 parking places is what my understanding was in tonight's presentation. So there was a little bit of mixed communication there. So on Friday, when it was pouring, drenching down rain, and my car is leaking in the back like a sieve, I was over at Subaru because I have a Subi. I just took a glance into how many people were eating outside, and I saw no one because it was pouring down rain. So I figured maybe they're all inside the pub room, which would be kind of a smart place to be sitting. However, I did notice that every single parking place was full. I took a drive down the alleyway to count how many parking places were empty. And then it dawned on me, I wonder how many people in those carts live in Oregon City. They've got to drive and park to their business. So you have at least 12 people parking, soon to be 14 people parking, just to get to work, assuming that is one person working in that cart and one person running the cart. Now, if they have to switch routines, you're going to change vehicles. And let's talk about the patrons that need to come in and park in there. I'm just kind of burnt out food carts just because it's just me. But I do go to Tony's every single Sunday and get a 6-pack of beer and 2 crabs, because that's what I do on Sunday. I pick crab and I have a beer, and I pretend I'm talking to my mom, because we did that every single Sunday for 6 years, and I've carried it on. The parking's not so available in front of Tony's, and that's quick turnover parking in front of Tony's. So if I don't see parking in there first, I could run around the corner, run my dog, and probably there's going to be a space when I get back. That's usually not available. And it sometimes are usually not Tony's people. So we are having a parking issue drastically in that area. I do not think the landlord is requiring their people to park off-site for their customers to come in and park, because there weren't very many customers the other day and there was 0 parking. And I also don't think they're required to go and buy the red permits that are available all underneath the trestles, because you can't park underneath the trestles. You've got those between the alleyways. There's a lot of parking in there, but it requires a red permit. So I do not think they're requiring to have to do off-site parking and buy a permit. I'm opposed to somebody who already blatantly disregards our city signage to turn around and give them a permit to lower their parking and to reduce more parking and get a variance. Why approve a variance when you can't even follow a signage? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, we have one more. We have a Denise Beasley. If you could please state your name and city of residence. Thank you. And you have 3 minutes, if possible. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Denise Beasley. I live in Oregon City in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I love Corner 14. It's fabulous. The variety of fun foods is great. The Celtic axe throwing is fun to watch. It's great. I'm not opposed to adding more carts or more seating. What I don't love is the overflow parking that is affecting my neighborhood a lot. I don't know if everybody understands the houses in our neighborhood were built over 100 years ago. We did not have garages then, which means we don't have driveways, which means we have to park on the street. If the overflow parking is taking up all of the parking on the street, what happens is the neighbors come home from the grocery store and they have to park 3 to 4 blocks away and schlep their groceries to the house back and forth, or get kids in and out of the car. And that's a problem. I like Dee Dee's idea about having the permit parking being used for Corner 14. Either Corner 14 buys the permits and has that available for customers, or maybe the city could not have that be a permit area. Maybe it could be changed to parking for customers. It doesn't seem like those areas are filled in. when I've gone there before. And like Dee Dee said, whenever I drive by there, it's full. The parking is full there. 22 spaces is not enough for that area when you're sitting down and eating for, you're going to be there for at least an hour. It is harder to get into Tony's because the overflow parking is there. Overflow parking goes up the street that goes behind Tony's. It goes up to specifically a neighbor I talked to tonight. She lives on 12th Street between Washington and Adams, and she says she's come home and had to park 3 to 4 blocks away from her house because she can't park in front of it. And I'm just hoping that something can be done about that. That's all I have to say.
We appreciate the comments. Thank you. Okay. As that's the last public comment, would the applicant like to respond to any of those concerns?
Well, I certainly thank the public comments. I also was a resident of the McLaughlin neighborhood. I lived there for a good 6 or 7 years and enjoyed being in that neighborhood when I lived there. The unfortunate thing is this is not an item that's applicable to the approval criteria. The application meets the requirements that the city has currently. The standards that exist, we meet the maximum allowable parking as illustrated in this application. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Fowler. Okay, yeah, fill out a card afterwards, but please state your name and city of residence.
Dan Fowler, Oregon City. I agree 100% with what Dirk just said. Technically, we've met all the conditions, and I appreciate the staff report. And actually, I do appreciate the 2 women that spoke here tonight too, and I'd like to address a couple things. And this is more for them, hopefully, but I think it's important to just say. One, we have it in our lease that none of the cart owners or employees can park in the parking lot. We require them to park off-site. We've encouraged them to park on John Adams Street and within the parking lot that we own next to the Lee building. They can park there for free. So that's in our lease and it's in condition. I can tell you that it's not always adhered to, but I can tell you that we tried very, very hard to have that happen because we know the value of having customer parking close. That's in our lease. I agree with the flags and I will take care of that tomorrow. I have talked to both of those tenants and to be honest with you, I forgot about it, but I agree with that 100%. So I can't do anything about the activity. I love the fact that we're busy and maybe that will encourage the city to build a parking structure on their 13th Street lot in downtown Oregon City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. All right. Before we close the public hearing, does anybody else have any questions for staff or anyone that spoke? Okay, then we will close the public hearing. And does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? Before you make a motion, I did want to state a couple things. Did you want to make a motion or?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to address the public comments regarding the parking. This keeps coming up in Oregon City. The parking requirements are woefully inadequate, especially for a city built on the side of a hill. It's unreasonable to expect people to walk and bike in Oregon City as if they lived in East Portland, where it's flat. In my opinion, that needs to change, but that's beyond our purview. So.
Well, I'd like to make a motion. I
still had a comment.
Okay.
Oh, no, not a problem. The only thing I wanted to say was, as Commissioner Stoll stated, this comes up every time. Every time we have a business that makes an application, most of the time they actually want to add more parking and we don't allow it because we have maximums. We've had applicants spend ridiculous amounts of money trying to build parking lots that we will not allow because they are deemed unnecessary. So most business owners want to give people a place to park, but parking lots are considered, for a large part, a waste of valuable space, and they're not very attractive. So I believe this applicant has met the requirements that the city has put on them, and that's what we need to make our decision on. So that's all I have to say.
I'd like to say another thing. You know, I also live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I am sandwiched in between commercial areas. And on my block, they have 2-hour parking. And maybe that's what some of the things need to go to so that there's a quicker turn with parking in there. That's not Mr. Fowler and Corner 14's issue. That is just a comment addressing parking challenges. So you don't have people parking there all day, employees parking or whatever.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else, or would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve GLUA-21-000044 SP-21-00085 with variance -21-00004 and FP/21-00004. The corner 14 variance to the rear yard setback.
Okay, I need to clarify one thing. There was a request by the applicant to
on the
remove condition 4. Where do we stand on that? What does staff feel? How do we feel about that? Is that something we need?
So the applicant talked about the loading area for vendors, which is on the other side of the garbage enclosure. But we also have a requirement to remove all the food carts in the event of a flood, which I believe would happen in that area between the building and the southern property line. So the reason we had that condition of approval is to make sure that the variance being requested is the minimum that would alleviate the hardship, meaning that the structure is located as far as possible from that property line while still maintaining enough space to remove the food carts in the event of a flood.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm having a hard time understanding what loading zone means, because the way it's worded by staff, it seems as though you're talking about an egress for the carts. In my mind, a loading zone is for deliveries to come in and unload. That's what, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there is a requirement for both. So food cart pods with more than 10 food carts are required to have a loading zone regardless of whether or not they're in a floodplain. So that's related to vendors and deliveries. For this one, there also has to be a space for the food carts to be evacuated in the event of a flood.
But that's separate from the loading zone.
In this case, yes, since they have a loading zone for vendors in another location, it could be the same area.
Thank you.
Okay, and was the problem that there were tables in the area that prevented it from being a evacuation zone?
No, they can have non-permanent structures there or furniture there. The reason we required it is because one of the variance criteria is that the applicant is requesting the minimum variance that is required. So we wanted to see the dimensions of that loading area to make sure that the structure is located as far from the property line while still maintaining that required loading area. So if it turns out that the required loading area is, X feet wide and the structure could be moved another foot closer while still maintaining that required loading area, then this condition would require them to do that to make sure that they're only requesting the minimum variance required to alleviate their hardship.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have a question.
Where's our motion stand?
I just have one question, Derek.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Stacks.
So just to make sure we're totally clear on the condition number 4, if we as a commission recommend approval and decide to strike condition number 4 or take it out of the condition of approval, my question is to staff is, will the applicant be able to meet those requirements? It's become a little confusing for me, actually. And it might be worth actually just pulling up the site plan and kind of looking at it together and see if we strike out condition number 4, can the requirement be met? And I'm not totally clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, eyeballing it, and we can pull up the site plan again if it's helpful. It doesn't look like they have all this extra space that they're not utilizing for the required structure. We just added that condition to, get more details on that as far as how much space is required for the ingress and egress of the food carts, and make sure that the structure is located as far away from the property line while still maintaining that required space.
Well, the record's closed, so we can't ask any more questions, right, from the applicant? Is it worth getting a clarification from the applicant? I mean, can they still remove food carts in the case of a flood in the way that it's currently designed? I guess that's the question, right?
It appears that they can. This condition just requires them to submit exactly what those required dimensions are of the loading or ingress egress area for the food carts.
What is the dimension between the proposed covered area and the building, roughly?
It is about 20 feet.
And the typical food cart is 10 feet wide?
The typical food cart that is shown on their site plan is about 8.5 by 16 feet.
Okay, so there'll be 12 feet additional or 6 feet additional on each side of the food cart to get out between the building and the proposed covered structure. So why would we need condition number 4 if that's the case?
Yeah, it's just more justification to show that they're only requesting the minimum variance required. So if there's a possibility to move that canopy structure another foot while still maintaining the required area, we would want them to do that. But it's possible that once they submit this site plan that's required by condition 4, they can show that they're only requesting the space that they need for the loading and the unloading of food carts, and they're not asking for more than the minimum required variance.
Okay. It sounds to me like condition 4 doesn't really, the applicant will still have what they need, and it's just a formality. That's my interpretation. But yeah, I will support a motion to approve the application, and I don't think condition 4 really has any effect on the application based on what we just talked about.
Okay, I will add one quick thing. I'm reading condition number 4. I'm just having a little trouble understanding loading and unloading. Are we talking about pulling them in and pulling them out? Are we talking about delivering goods to the carts? What's loading and unloading? I am sorry if that's a dumb question.
Yeah, we're talking about removing the food carts.
Pulling them in and out.
Hauling them off, and then bringing them back after a flood.
Yeah, I don't know if a designated loading zone is going to make much of a difference because they're going to be pretty much pulling everything out anyway. So reserving a space for that, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, egress in case of a flood is different from a loading zone. Those are two different issues. I don't know why we're discussing the egress
it's not a loading
component related to the loading zone. That doesn't make any, I mean, I'm looking at the code from the report. Sites with more than 10 mobile food units at any time shall have a designated loading area. Pretty clearly in there, says nothing about egress. So I'm not sure where egress keeps coming into this conversation.
Okay, so would it be legal for us to pull that out?
Well, to remove or? Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we're in agreement that we don't see any purpose to it.
But it seems to me it's just a submittal requirement, right?
Right.
So based on actual measured calculations. So I'm not exactly sure what keeping the condition, the detriment of keeping the condition.
True, because they don't really designate the size or the the restrictions of that loading zone. Besides, the applicant shall provide a revised plan identifying a designated loading area. Does that mean the loading area would have to be completely barren?
No, they can have furniture that can be removed in the event of a flood.
Okay, so as long as they designate it, that's basically all we're asking them for?
Yes, we're asking them to show the required dimensions for, I won't call it a loading area, but the area to load and haul the food carts.
All right, and we wouldn't technically necessarily put any restrictions on that loading area?
No.
Okay, all right. Then I guess it doesn't matter. Okay. All right, thank you.
If I may, I would urge you to make a new motion because I feel like I'm not entirely clear where the original motion sits. So if you could.
All right, can we get a new motion, a nice clean motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this application. And I don't have the number in front of me, I'm sorry, but I'll make the motion to approve these applications that are before us right now.
Second, and that's GLUA 21-00044.
Okay. And that is a motion to approve with conditions? Okay. All right, call a vote.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
And Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Fowler, only person left. Okay. Got to find my place in the agenda. Okay, we have no more agenda items besides communications, and I believe Laura has something for us.
Yes. I just wanted to express my appreciation and gratitude to the Planning Commission and to the Oregon City. I've been honored to serve the city for more than 18 years, and Wednesday will be my last day. I am going to be I accepted a position for the City of Happy Valley as planning manager there. So I'm looking forward to more opportunities to spend more time with my family, particularly in the evening. So the city has not yet posted my job as community development director. Also, in other news, we have extended an offer for someone for the planning manager position. Until they come on board, Christina Robertson Gardner will be acting interim planning manager. But thank you for all your hard work. There's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things in Oregon City. And thanks for your volunteering and your dedication to the city. This is how governance works. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. And we're going to all miss you. I have no doubt it's going to be different with you gone. All right. I guess that's it. Anybody else have anything? Okay, we're adjourned.
Recording stopped.